High school is one of the most distinct and memorable periods of a person's life that almost everyone goes through. It's messy, confusing, chaotic, unusual, and sometimes, at least in my opinion, kind of disappointing. Nowadays, in both film and television, using the setting of high school has become extremely oversaturated. There are literally hundreds of movies and shows depicting this period of life, ranging from comedies to dramas, attempting to use both realism and more fictitious approaches, and it can be hard for something of this setting to really stand out from the crowd. Don't get me wrong, when discussing TV in particular, many of these just happen to be some of my all-time favourite shows, Freaks and Geeks and Skins to name a couple. However, when specifically regarding melodramas, it can be easy to get these types of narratives wrong, and many don't come close to the reality of what it's actually like to be in high school, and the individual highs and lows that naturally come with being around that age. One show that I think really gets this balance right is Euphoria. When discussing Euphoria, there are so many elements that I could dive into that makes the show what it is, such as the engaging cinematography, all-round amazing performances, layered narrative, gorgeous lighting, and that labyrinth soundtrack. I could go on, but I feel one of the main aspects of the show that was really fundamental to its success are the characters, and how creator Sam Levinson introduces, crafts, and develops them in such an interesting and creative way. In retrospect, Euphoria has a lot of characters. We've got Rue, Nate, Kat, Jules, Maddie, McKay, and Cassie, each having a centric, more focused episode as we learn about their backstories and why they are the ways they are. However, you could also argue that Rue's sister Gia, Mum Leslie, Fezco, Lexi, Nate's dad Cal, and Ali are all regarded as part of the main cast. That's 13 characters, which sounds like a fair amount, but it never feels overwhelming or unclear as to who is who, and each character feels vivid and three-dimensional and, dare I say, real by the end of the first season, and I think it's important to understand how this was done. At the very beginning of episode 1, it's clearly established through the repeated use of voiceover that our protagonist is Zendaya's Rue Bennett, a 17-year-old recovering drug addict struggling to find her purpose and place in the world. This signifies the first use of what is referred to as cold opens, used in Euphoria for establishing and developing a different character at the start of each episode. This narrative technique is used in television and film to jump straight into a story at the beginning before the title sequence is shown. Doing this engages and invests the audience in the narrative as soon as possible and reduces the likeliness of them losing interest, and Euphoria uses this technique to its full potential in my opinion. In the first episode, we learn about where and when the show takes place, Rue's troubled history of drugs, addiction, anxiety, body image, her mental health, her family, making friends, various disorders, and her general outlook on life all in just 7 minutes, while simultaneously setting the stylistic tone and ongoing themes for the entire show. The rest of the series follows in the same format as we learn the reasoning behind Nate's anger issues and repressed sexuality in episode 2, Kat's relationship with food and sexual exploration in episode 3, Jules' history of gender identity and self-harm in episode 4, Maddie's self-confidence and complicated relationship with Nate in episode 5, McKay's parental pressures and his relationship with Cassie in episode 6, and finally Cassie's familial issues and pregnancy in episode 7. However, before all of these, we are first introduced to the majority of the characters in episode 1. In Rue's cold open, we briefly get introduced to her mum Leslie, as well as her younger sister Gia. It is indirectly established that their father is no longer with them, setting up the frameworks of Rue's addiction. Leslie is portrayed as loving and caring for her family, and Gia is someone who looks up to her sister despite her flaws. From then onwards comes a chain of introducing the audience to the main characters, as we meet one character who then brings us to the next character, and so on. Firstly, we briefly meet Jules as Rue sees her on the way home from rehab riding her bike. This sets her character up as mysterious, which in a lot of ways she remains throughout the entire series, especially to Rue. This links us to our next character, Fezco, who tells Rue about Jules and that he thinks they might turn out to be friends. Despite being Rue's drug dealer, from this very first interaction we learn that he genuinely does care for Rue, as he asks how she is after her overdose, and shows concern when she wants to buy more drugs straight after leaving rehab. When Rue leaves after scoring, she sees Nate and McKay buying beer off Fezco, as Rue narrates informing the audience of her negative sexual experience with Nate, and teases the events to come involving him and Jules, which makes the audience have an instant dislike towards his character. We then shift into following McKay and Nate as they drive away in their truck, and we find one of the most evident character foreshadowings in the entire show. McKay begins to express concerns about having the party at his house, as he feels his parents will find out as they notice little details of change, and Nate replies,
"Fine, we'll just take a picture of everything, we'll put it back the way we found it, done." fuck is this Mission Impossible?
This signifies McKay as someone with a lot of anxiety, especially in regard to his parents, but more importantly is the first indication of Nate's sociopathic tendencies, as even though it's in a less high-stakes situation, Nate is already scheming to cover up his own tracks and wrongdoings, foreshadowing later in the show as he frames Tyler for abusing Maddie and manipulates the people around him for his own benefit. We then see his first interaction with Jules as he harasses her and makes her fall off her bike. This is where the show differs from others of its kind, as many would just have the popular guys all grouped together with this kind of behaviour, whereas in Euphoria, McKay actually expresses his distaste with Nate's actions and individually establishes himself as the respectful character we eventually know him to be. After this, we follow Jules for the first time in the series, as Rue gives us some brief information on her backstory regarding her parents' divorce and custodial matters, but her character is still painted in a mysterious light, as Rue admits she doesn't even know the whole story of Jules' past, just that she doesn't like to talk about it. This indicates that Rue, despite narrating us through the world and the story, is not an omniscient narrator, meaning she is not all-knowing of the world and characters presented to us. While later hinted at briefly throughout the show, this idea is further developed most evidently in the first special episode, Trouble Don't Last Always, as it's indicated that Rue may not be the most reliable narrator.
And at the same time, we're starting to see a little bit of Rue's unreliability as a narrator. This episode is starting to kind of sow the seeds that Rue's perspective is very much Rue's perspective, and she's not always accurate in her retelling of things. And she is limited in her ability to understand the other emotional worlds of other characters.
Going back to the first episode, Kat is first introduced when it's mentioned that her and Jules met in summer school, and the two talk about going to McKay's party. We then switch to Kat's perspective and are properly introduced to her, Maddie and BB getting ready for the party. Through the interactions, we learn about Maddie's layered relationship with self-confidence due to Nate's remarks, and Kat's need for approval from the people around her. Kat and Maddie, in my opinion, turn out to develop the most out of all the characters throughout the first season, and these characteristics, shown evident in their introduction, are fundamental in demonstrating how much they change. By the end of the first season, Kat evolves from her insecurity and really explores her sexuality, and Maddie, despite not conclusively acting on it, recognises her relationship with Nate as extremely unhealthy and unsustainable. The next character we meet is Lexi, Rue's childhood best friend, as Rue goes to her house asking for help in passing a drug test. Lexi reluctantly agrees, establishing her character's willingness to help Rue, and how much she loves her friend despite not agreeing with her behaviour and addictions. In this scene, we're also introduced to Lexi's older sister Cassie, as we switch back and forth between them and Nate and McKay's party, who are coincidentally talking about Cassie. Nate speaks about her in a really derogative and objectifying manner, while McKay again reinforces his morality and character by calling Nate out on his malicious behaviour and defending Cassie. As we switch back to Rue, we learn about Cassie's new relationship with McKay, and a brief insight into her relationship with her mother. Later, as the girls pick up Rue on the way to the party, they drive past the motel in which Jules is meeting her hookup, and we switch to Jules' perspective. This is where we first meet Cal, who at this point we are unaware of the fact he's Nate's father. This is where Euphoria uses our expectations against us, as we previously learned through the other characters' introductions key elements of their personalities through their first shown interactions. However, with Cal, they reverse this effect. When he is first shown, he seems intimidating and possibly quite dangerous. For the next 4 episodes, he remains this way. When he goes after Jules at the carnival, we are led to believe he may want to threaten or harm her in some way, making his actual emotional breakdown and display of vulnerability all the more shocking and adding an extra layer of depth to his character. At this point, the only character we haven't met is Ali, who we don't actually meet until episode 2 when Rue attends our NA meeting. Although his introduction is very brief, we still learn about his troubled history with drugs and addiction, and we get the impression he has struggled with sobriety a lot in his life. The details of this aren't really explored until his and Rue's special episode. His introduction is more about his effect on Rue and how he makes her reflect on her addiction, specifically the first time she got high, and consequently how she has ended up the way she is. This again correlates with their relationship for the rest of the show, as he tries to guide her onto the right path using his experiences and earned wisdom as examples of what addiction can do to a person. Euphoria is a great example of how to introduce characters in a captivating and effective way by displaying their characteristics subtly through their opening interactions and foreshadowing future events. but also using the opposite effect to create more mysterious and enigmatic characters, such as with Jules and Cal. If you haven't seen the show, I really recommend it. When it comes to emotionally realistic depictions of high school on TV, there really isn't much that compares. Thanks for watching, it means a lot. If you haven't subscribed and you enjoyed this video, feel free to. I'm trying to get around to making one of these a week, so if it's something you think you'd be into, then why not stick around? As always, thanks for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.
What a fucking pussy.